Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning everyone, and may I also welcome you all to the almost sunny Frankfurt and thank the Secretariat for putting together an impressive program for this ESRB flagship event. And many thanks to Pablo, virtually online, for his very insightful opening remarks this morning. Today, I would like to reflect on the role of the ESRB and its mandate regarding financial stability and macroprudential policy in the European Union. I will discuss three interlinked issues. Firstly, the ESRB at 15, an adolescent with a solid track record. Being a functionalist, I date the start of the European Systemic Risk Board back to the De La Rosière report in 2009. Form follows function, you know. I'm glad to be the last functionalist in Europe standing if needed. Secondly, I'll discuss some key starting points for the forthcoming ESRB review, or should I say ongoing ESRB review. And thirdly, I focus on new frontiers, especially dealing with non-banks and the better use of data and analysis. So let's look first back and then forward. Since the global financial crisis, major efforts have been made to ensure financial stability in the European Union and globally through better regulation and supervision. I think it's fair to say that financial stability has risen forcefully up the agenda of central banks, not least as it provides essential support for our primary goal of price stability. In recent years, financial systems and financial stability measures have been subject to true real-life stress tests, with the global economy being hit by a series of major shocks, or polycrisis as it's often called, over just a short period of time. That is the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's illegal, brutal war in Ukraine, the surge in inflation and its containment, and the sharp rise in interest rates. In my view, the financial systems in the European Union and elsewhere have been able to withstand these shocks rather well. The Basel Committee points out that the strong resilience has been largely thanks to the tightened capital and liquidity requirements for banks. True, the capital ratios of European banks have roughly doubled since the global financial crisis, as you can see from this slide. The increased capital buffers have been and will continue to be necessary in the current operating environment, which is filled with geopolitical and other uncertainties. I would add that the active use of macroprudential policy has further supported the resilience of the financial system in Europe. As part of its mandate, the ESRB assesses systemic risks in the EU and, where appropriate, issues warnings and recommendations. In our recent systemic risk assessment, we conclude that while disinflation in the European Union is on track, Financial stability risks remain elevated amid heightened geopolitical risks and the still fragile recovery of the European economy. In the latest ECB projection, growth outlook was revised down, and in addition to that, the risks to that growth outlook are tilted to the downside. In particular, we have to be aware of both the direct and indirect impact of current geopolitical risks on the EU financial system. Geopolitical events may directly affect financial markets by increasing volatility, affecting capital flows, exchange rates, credit spreads. Indirectly, they can disrupt global trade and increase commodity prices, thus challenging households and businesses in Europe. And geopolitical factors are clearly linked to the increased cyber risks by hostile, often state-sponsored hacker groups. In the financial markets, the risk appetite has been unusually strong, especially considering the high macrofinancial uncertainty. The abrupt, albeit short-lived market correction in early August showed how sensitive this finally can be. If repeated, the vulnerabilities in the non-bank institutions could amplify adverse market dynamics. And we need to continue closely to monitor the CRE market, commercial real estate market. And finally, vulnerabilities in the banking sector could resurface, even though the resilience is strong, as I said, especially if the first two risks were to materialize. This could increase credit risks and tighten funding conditions at the same time. In any case, it continues to be essential to maintain the resilience of the EU financial system. Ensuring adequate resilience and effective but flexible regulation is one building block in promoting European industrial competitiveness along the lines of the recent report of Mario Draghi. And as part of the efforts of advancing more investment and boosting higher productivity, it is indeed crucial to advance the Savings and Investment Union, or the ex-Capital Market Union, and also to complete the Banking Union. Uh, 15 years ago, the global financial crisis revealed weaknesses in EU banking supervision, as we now well know. It was clear that major changes to financial supervision were necessary in order to help prevent and mitigate future financial crises. Thus, EU Commission President José Manuel Barroso set up an independent high-level group on financial supervision in the European Union to make recommendations on strengthening European supervisory arrangements covering all financial sectors, in principle all. The high-level group, chaired by Jacques de Larosière, was given a very broad mandate and very little time. In only 3 months, the group delivered an important and insightful report. And it provided the basis not only for setting up the European Systemic Risk Board, but establishing the whole European system of financial supervision, including the European supervisory authorities. One of the key conclusions of the report was that regulators and supervisors had not sufficiently focused on the, I quote, the macrosystemic risks of a contagion of correlated horizontal shocks, unquote. I think here every word matters, macrosystemic risks, contagion, correlated horizontal shocks. As a policy response, de Larosière proposed establishing a European Systemic Risk Council, as he then called it, and his group called it. As a member of the European Commission at the time, I had the privilege of being present at the creation of the ESRB, specifically by preparing with my team the legislative proposals for setting up the ESRB. While my dear colleague Michel Barnier introduced the legislation for the European system of financial supervision. The legislative process was swift, to the credit of the European Parliament and the Council, and the General Board of the ESRB held its inaugural meeting in the Eurotower in January 2011, even though it in practice started its work already some months before in 2010, as I recall. Given the constantly evolving environment, it is necessary to review the mandate and workings of the ESRB from time to time. The Commission is now tasked for the second time with reporting to the European Parliament and the Council on the review of the ESRB. While the ESRB will not take a formal position on its own founding regulation, we believe that it is important that the co-legislators have the opportunity to benefit from the experience of those who have been deeply involved in the work of the ESRB. For this purpose, the ESRB, our General Board, set up a so-called high-level group to identify which adjustments to the mission or framework of the ESRB might be required, and to provide its insights to the EU co-legislators before the review process. I have the honor of chairing this group. So let me give you an interim snapshot of the key issues as we see it in the review. First, as part of the work of the high-level group, we have been seeking feedback more broadly from the membership of the ESRB by way of a survey among the members of the Advisory Technical Committee on how the ESRB has succeeded in its core tasks over the years. And we have also sought to explore whether the current operating model is fit for purpose and how the ESRB and its tasks should be renewed, revisited, and developed as the financial system itself evolves. The feedback received from the members of the ATC has been most valuable. There was a high turnover of responses. I'm very grateful for that. And this feedback indicates that the current model and mandate of the ESRB do not need a complete overhaul, but rather some more targeted adjustment. The work done by the ESRB over the years is considered especially valuable with regard to the definition of macroprudential policies and the development of a comprehensive framework for macroprudential policies in Europe, particularly in the banking sector. And this work has had a significant impact. The ESRB, through its determined efforts, has helped to preemptively identify and mitigate the build-up of systemic risks in Europe. Going forward, the ESRB could, in my view, play an even stronger role in the holistic analysis of systemic risks within the EU, especially because the ESRB has a unique composition, a unique ability to examine cross-sectoral, cross-border and interlinked risks and the, should I say, truly systemic dimension of these risks. The ESRB is also in an excellent position to work with academia, as we have intensively done, extensively and intensively, and also to work with other EU and international organizations. A particular advantage, I want to say, is for the ESRB is that the European supervisory authorities, EBA, ESMA, EIOPA, SSM, participate in our work and provide their own respective perspectives. It is crucial that your expertise, their expertise, will continue to support the work of the ESRB. Leading on from this, I'd like to call for deeper collaboration at the EU level on country risk analysis. Given the macro-proof mandate of the ESRB, there is scope for capitalizing on our analytical work in the EU's macroeconomic imbalances procedure. In particular, the ESRB has been developing the concept of macroprudential policy stance to analyze the way in which national authorities are using macro-proof tools to mitigate the systemic risks to which their financial sector is exposed. A deepening of EU cooperation in this field would contribute to strengthening economic stability in a particular member state and or of the EU in its entirety. The feedback we received also highlighted that in its systemic risk assessment, the ESRB should be able to incorporate a range of new emerging risks and vulnerabilities. Several members underlined the need to better understand systemic risks related to the non-bank financial institutions. Other increasingly relevant risks include climate change, artificial intelligence, and cyber security. On non-banks, we already had an excellent panel discussion yesterday, and we soon continue with the effect of AI and its systemic risks. The ESRB is already engaged in risk monitoring and analysis of the non-bank spectrum and has identified many structural vulnerabilities that require our attention. Please note, I listened to the panel discussion yesterday very carefully. If I were to take the point made by Petra yesterday, and I will not call this phenomenon a non-bank sector. It's a variety of things. Perhaps a non-bank spectrum might work better. I leave that to you with a question mark. In any case, more work is needed to better understand the systemic risks of the non-bank spectrum in the same depth as those for the banks. This is important not only for financial stability, but also for ensuring a solid basis for the Saving and Investment Union, SIU, as Stefan already coined it yesterday. Let me underline the critical importance of data, access to data, better use of data in the analysis of non-banks. To understand the systemic risks related to non-banks, We simply need better data to be able to identify and map the vulnerabilities and interconnections. Only once that's done, we will be able to capitalize on more advanced methods, such as system-wide stress testing to locate the vulnerabilities in the system. Dear friends, before concluding, I'd like to highlight 3 priorities for the way we work in the coming years that I find critical for the ESRB and that are also based on the feedback we have received. In my view, we should first of all enhance our capacity by making a better use of data and research. Second, we should bring into use new analytical methods and technologies. And third, let's focus on our core activities, not spread all over the world. Let me just elaborate on this a little more. First, active development of data analytics and research-driven analysis is actually nothing new at the ESRB as such, as you certainly know. But I firmly believe that the importance of analysis which is based on data and research cannot be overemphasized in our times where disinformation is being used as a weapon. In today's world, there is a great risk that genuine information, genuine analysis will be crowded out. Data is the gold or the oil of our digital world today. It is a valuable resource and necessary basis for high-quality analysis. Following the global financial crisis, the reporting requirements for banks and other financial operators have been substantially increased. We know it well and we hear about that quite often. Financial supervisors and central banks consequently have a duty to use the new data effectively and efficiently. It should not be wasted, it should not be in vain. The challenge for the ESRB is that not all relevant data are readily available to it. The rules governing these ESRB's access to data can be broadly divided into 2 types. As you can see on the screen, ex ante access, whereby the ESRB has access to data on a regular, ongoing basis as soon as it is reported. We already benefit from quite a few data sets under this framework, which is well aligned with our mandate and tasks. The other type is ex post access through ad hoc requests, which take time to process. For some important data sets, we have only ex post access, which includes granular data sets collected by the ESAs. While cooperation regarding data sharing between the ESAs, the European supervisory agencies, and the ESRB has been excellent, the ex post legal framework has inherent limitations that hamper the ESRB's ability to continuously monitor and mitigate risks to financial stability. For this reason, the ESRB sent a letter signed by President Christine Lagarde last month to European legislative authorities, co-legislators, Parliament and Council, and also the Commission, urging them to broaden the ESRB's access to information from supervisors so that data can be shared with the ESRB by default. And I want to underline that this is extremely important for the ESRB to be able to effectively fulfill its mandate in assessing the systemic risks and to promptly react in instances of projected instability. for that you need a safe access to data. My second point here is, as the volume of data increases, we must also invest in high-level analysis methods. Modern methods of risk assessment make use of advanced tools and technologies such as AI and machine learning, which enable better forecasting and better analysis. With these technologies, it is possible to process large amounts of data, and that is very helpful in the assessment of systemic risk. And third, finally, to focus on our core activities has been rightly underlined both by my colleagues in the high-level group, Pablo Luis de Guindos and Professor Steve Cecchetti, and in the ESRB member feedback. We should, in my view, too, focus on our core activities even in the midst of various crises. We cannot be experts in everything, nor do we need to be. The added value that we bring as an organization should focus on the area where we are the best experts, in our view: systemic level risk analysis of the financial system. Our added value should always come from a deep understanding of vulnerabilities and interconnections in the financial system, and of the various factors that get amplified when shocks hit the system. Dear friends, let me now conclude. In the grand scheme of things, which we always have to keep in mind, financial stability fundamentally depends on the geopolitical and macroeconomic context, on the geopolitical and macroeconomic environment we live in. The best service for EU financial stability now is to maintain European unity and firmly support Ukraine in the face of Russia's threat. Furthermore, it is crucial to strengthen the structural foundations of the European economy by focusing our policy actions on productivity growth and industrial competitiveness, while retaining the European model of social inclusion and equal opportunity. On its part, the European Systemic Risk Board, together with the ESAs, i.e. the Single Supervisory Mechanism, as well as the Single Supervisory Mechanism, the financial supervisory authorities in the member states and the central banks, continues to play a strong role in safeguarding the stability of the EU financial system. Our work will continue to focus on the evolving systemic risks and will be based on comprehensive and safe data, high-quality research and analysis, and wide-ranging cooperation between different authorities. So I look forward to continuing to work with you for maintaining and ensuring financial stability in Europe, which is of paramount importance for the present and future generations of Europe. Thank you very much for your kind attention.